The image remains iconic: long blonde hair, wraparound shades, leather vest, a cross glinting at the throat, and a voice that cracked somewhere between preacher and outlaw. For millions who watched Dog the Bounty Hunter through the 2000s, Duane Chapman was no ordinary television star. He was a modern folk figure, half vigilante, half moral philosopher, tracking fugitives through Hawaiian backstreets and backroads, quoting scripture between radio calls. To his fans, Dog personified redemption, an ex-convict who turned capture into ministry, proof that second chances could still wear sunglasses. But television years move fast. By 2026, the chase has slowed, the long mane is streaked with silver, and Chapman, now in his early 70s, lives quieter days shadowed by a sense of melancholy that fame never truly prepared him for. To understand the man behind that transformation, you must return to the contradictions that built his legend. Born in Denver in 1953, Duane Lee Chapman grew up in a household where discipline and rebellion danced uneasily. He left home young, gravitating toward biker culture and law's rougher edges. In 1976, he was convicted of first-degree murder for his role as accomplice in a botched drug deal confrontation that ended in death. Chapman didn't pull the trigger, but Texas law made him culpable. He served 18 months in a state penitentiary, a stretch that would define his moral vocabulary forever. He still quotes the memory like a scripture of its own: "That was where I learned compassion, when no one saw me as redeemable." Redemption became his brand. After prison, he swore off violence, channeling restless energy into bounty hunting, a profession that let him pursue others without becoming them. Over the next 2 decades, he built a reputation as both relentless and oddly pastoral, tracking wanted men and women but insisting on prayer before handcuffs. His Hawaiian base added cinematic contrast, paradise as backdrop for confrontation. When A&E launched Dog the Bounty Hunter in 2004, Chapman's blend of discipline, drama, and spontaneous biblical homily proved irresistible. Viewers loved the rough gentleness, leather vests hiding emotional transparency, tough guy talk giving way to tears. For 8 seasons, he and his team, wife Beth at his side, children in tactical gear, sons and daughters blending family dynamics with fieldwork, became staples of reality TV's whirlwind-era fame, though rearranged intimacy. Chapman was unfiltered before social media made transparency profitable, and the very qualities that drew audiences, honesty, volatility, faith, also attracted scrutiny. Off-camera quarrels became headlines, arrests and controversies followed. Through it all stood Beth Chapman, flame-haired and formidable, partner in business and in confrontation. Together they hunted, argued, reconciled, and evangelized, a marital tempest televised in real time. When she was diagnosed with throat cancer in 2017, the family's public drama shifted from pursuit to caretaking. Dog remains open about how helpless he felt. "I could track a fugitive anywhere," he told an interviewer, "but I couldn't chase that disease out of her body." The statement encapsulates the helplessness that fame cannot disguise. Beth's death in June 2019 ended an era not only for the show but for Chapman's identity itself. In the months that followed, fans watched grief turn him spectral. His television voice cracked, interviews trailed off mid-sentence. He confessed suicidal thoughts and failing health. The same charisma that once kept fugitives talking tried now to keep himself alive. Yet even in despair he clung to his lifelong creed of resilience. "God found me in a cell, He'll find me anywhere," he wrote on social media, a mixture of bravado and plea. For a man who built a career on saving others from their worst moments, facing his own grief publicly became a harsher redemption than any bounty. Still, the instinct to work never left. By 2020 he had returned sporadically to television with Dog's Most Wanted and subsequent spin-offs, but the energy was different, less spectacle, more testimony. In place of the roaring motorcade stood a reflective figure talking about mortality, loss, and endurance. He remarried in 2021 to Francie Frayne, a Colorado rancher who had lost her husband to cancer around the same time Dog lost Beth. Their shared grief became shared life. Fans greeted the union with mixed emotion, some protective of Beth's memory, others relieved to see light return to his eyes. Chapman spoke of the marriage as divine pairing. "She pulled me out of the pit." Yet shadows lingered, health scares, controversies surrounding estranged family members, the inevitable thinning of celebrity relevance. Age brings paradoxes for public figures built on momentum. For Dog, aging means confronting stillness. The adrenaline of hunts once drowned introspection. Now introspection is all that remains. He spends much of his time in Colorado, keeping early mornings sacred: coffee, Bible, presence of dogs both literal and spiritual. Former colleagues describe him as equal parts preacher and grandfather, still quick with action movie aphorisms but gentled by loss. The bounty hunter has become a storyteller of cautionary tales. When you chase others long enough, he jokes, you finally catch yourself. The sadness hovering over his later years doesn't hinge on tragedy alone, it's a subtler melancholy, the awareness of distance between myth and mortality. Reality television once fixed him in perpetual middle age, but cameras can't immortalize bodies. Heart problems and knees eroded by decades of pursuit slow him. Interviews show gratitude laced with fatigue. The man once defined by roar now speaks in measured drawl, quoting verses about endurance rather than conquest. Yet when fans approach him at airports, he still signs autographs with trademark flourish, capital letters shaped like vows, and thanks them earnestly for remembering. In those encounters the old electricity flickers back, the quieter life has also sharpened his faith. Chapman now speaks publicly in churches and recovery centers, emphasizing accountability over punishment. To audiences struggling with addiction or crime, he remains living testament to redemption's possibility. He admits failure freely, describing temper and pride as recurring battles. The only bounty left to hunt is ego, he grins. That humility resonates far more powerfully than televised takedowns ever did. For longtime fans, the sight of Dog Chapman slowed by time evokes both affection and sorrow. The world that once idolized tough messianic heroes has shifted toward irony. Sincerity often feels outdated. Yet Chapman persists, unironically quoting scripture, praying before interviews, hugging strangers who call him brother dog. In his universe, faith still justifies optimism. The sadness, then, is not a story of defeat but of scale, an action hero discovering quieter missions. He calls it learning to listen to the whisper instead of chasing the shout. His life today may appear subdued, but beneath the stillness lies continuity, the same restless compassion that propelled him from cell block to celebrity. The cameras are fewer, the hunts rare, yet redemption as vocation endures. He has been, at every stage, a man negotiating boundaries between justice and mercy, fame and faith, action and aging. The world watched him chase fugitives, now it watches him chase peace. In both pursuits, he's stubbornly relentless. For a man who once measured success by the speed of a takedown, stillness can feel like exile. When the production crews packed up and the roar of SUVs no longer echoed through Honolulu streets, Duane "Dog" Chapman had to hunt something intangible, peace of mind. The chase in these later years is inward. He journals daily, keeps his Bible within arm's reach, and begins most mornings with devotionals rather than warrants. If I can't outrun grief, he likes to say, I can at least walk alongside it. In that single sentence lives an acceptance many never expected from television's loudest bounty hunter. His physical health constantly reminds him that time collects its debts. Heart problems, joint pain, and fatigue have humbled a man once carved from perpetual motion. The routine of gym workouts replaced by therapy exercises, the adrenaline of stakeouts exchanged for quiet ranch walks. Chapman treats these changes not merely as aging but as instruction. The Lord's telling me to slow down, and I keep pretending I didn't hear. The humor betrays vulnerability. Maintaining fitness is now less about televised muscle and more about staying here for family, a word that remains both salvation and complication. Few families have lived so publicly or so turbulently. Dog's children, many of whom appeared on Dog the Bounty Hunter, each experienced fame filtered through paternal intensity. His leadership blended affection with high expectations, a formula that didn't always translate to harmony. Following Beth's death, disagreements over inheritance, production rights, and personal boundaries spilled into tabloids. Some bonds fractured, others deepened. Two of his sons, Leland and Duane Lee Jr., maintain affectionate but independent lives. Daughter Bonnie has oscillated between closeness and distance. Chapman addresses the friction with painful frankness. Families argue louder when microphones are nearby. Yet despite estrangements, his voice softens whenever he speaks about reconciliation. He remains convinced that love outlasts conflict, another creed learned from both scripture and experience. The new chapter of redemption outwardly began with Francie Frayne. Their relationship, born in mirrored loss, unfolded gently. Both widowed within months of each other, they first shared condolence calls, then prayer sessions, and finally laughter, the rarest evidence of survival after grief. They married in 2021 on a Colorado mountaintop, the ceremony intimate yet filmed for fans who still view his life as serialized redemption saga. To Francie, he credits sobriety from despair. "She's the bounty God sent for me," he told a Christian podcast. Their shared faith saturates their household: mealtime blessings, spontaneous hymns, handwritten verses on refrigerator doors. Together they travel for ministry events, preaching second chances to former addicts, convicts, and anyone bruised by loss. Though his public brand remains Dog the Bounty Hunter, Duane Chapman increasingly behaves like an evangelist who substitutes spirituality for surveillance work. The tactical vests now appear mostly at speaking engagements, symbols rather than tools. He calls them armor for testimony. Audiences who once tuned in for car chases now hear sermons laced with showman energy, half revival meeting, half reunion. He tells them that bounty hunting still exists, but the fugitives have changed: addiction, bitterness, fear. "You track them with love, not cuffs." Those lines, delivered with gravel-throated sincerity, draw applause from people who grew up watching him transform confrontation into compassion. Behind his bravado lies genuine solitude. Fame can fill rooms without curing loneliness. Chapman admits that after Beth's death, he often sat in parked cars outside grocery stores, too paralyzed to enter. That confession, utterly human, endures as one of his most cited interviews, a window into grief less cinematic than debilitating. When Francie entered his life, she insisted on therapy and faith-based counseling, a discipline unfamiliar to him. "Men think prayer is enough," she told an interviewer. "Sometimes God sends you professionals too." Their marriage thrives on that mix of devoutness and practicality. They tend chickens, rescue animals, and run modest outreach programs for recently released offenders, encouraging employment and emotional literacy. He jokes that running a ranch is the toughest bounty he's ever chased. "It never quits and can't be handcuffed till money remains comfortable but mortal." Reality TV royalties shrank as reruns migrated to streaming. Chapman lives easily yet no longer lavishly, occasionally selling memorabilia for charity. The paradox of celebrity economics doesn't escape him. "In this business, you're priceless until the next commercial break." These days he views reputation as ministry more than livelihood. At gatherings he carries guitar and sings gospel tunes, far from cameras, reminders that performance once paid bills, now it heals. The contemporary Dog Chapman is equal parts humility and habit. He still wears the familiar leather cuffs, though they retire more often to closet shelves. His hair, once a blonde emblem of defiance, falls shorter, streaked with silver like autograph lines of time. Yet there's vitality in his faith language. He quotes scripture with outlaw cadence, refurbishing verses into motivational slogans. "The gospel according to Dog demands action. Prayer without pursuit is just hiding." Listeners, many from recovery communities, repeat his words as lifelines. His internet presence, though diminished, continues through podcasts and short motivational videos recorded at home. They carry messages of transformation drawn from prison anecdotes. "Every saint has a past," he reminds followers, "and every sinner has a future." Typical Chapman, rhymed, unsophisticated, sincere. View counts climb not for nostalgia alone but for authenticity. He remains the rebellious believer audiences trust precisely because he's blemished. The sadness accompanying his later life is subtle, almost atmospheric. It isn't tragedy but gravity, a man aware of outliving his legend. The old show's soundtrack still plays at conventions. Fans call his name with affection that stings. When they ask if he'll film again, he shrugs. "Maybe," he says, "if God writes another chapter worth filming." That deference to divine authorship hints at fatigue and contentment intertwined. The world sees resignation, he calls it surrender. In private moments he revisits footage of himself and Beth, not to mourn but to remind. "She kept me honest," he told a church audience. "She'd say, 'Dog, you're chasing criminals, but who's chasing you?'" In that joke lies insight. Beth remained the mirror that fame obscured. Losing her forced him to look inward. The process, he says, is conversion without altar call. He prays aloud each night, first for loved ones, then for the souls of fugitives he once arrested. Forgiveness, both given and sought, underlies everything. As decades of adrenaline yield to contemplation, Chapman stands paradoxically fulfilled and lonely, a figure defined by forgiveness more than ferocity. His life now may appear subdued to those expecting stunt-worthy closure, but he calls it his slow miracle. "God took a fighter," he explains, "and taught him how to kneel." Few sound bites summarize American reinvention better: penitentiary to pulpit, manhunt to ministry, rage to reflection. The bounty, it seems, has always been redemption, and he is still searching. Old habits fade but never vanish. Sometimes Duane Chapman still wakes before dawn, scans news bulletins, and feels the flicker of pursuit buzzing in his chest. The instinct to chase remains coded in his bones, but the quarry is now intangible: purpose, quiet, forgiveness. People expect bounty hunters to age into myth. Instead, Dog has aged into gratitude. I used to thank God for the arrest, he jokes at speaking events. These days I thank him for the mornings I don't need one. The laughter this line draws is tender, not ironic, because audiences sense the truth beneath it. Redemption has outlasted adrenaline. In recent years, he and Francie have concentrated on turning their ranch into a base for outreach. Former inmates, struggling addicts, and young people drifting through rural Colorado find temporary refuge there. The work is small but personal: meals shared, chores divided, evenings filled with stories of failure unspooled into lessons. Chapman doesn't lecture. He listens, then punctuates testimony with a mixture of scripture and street language that only he can fuse. You survived the pit, now help someone else climb out. His listeners know the sentence isn't metaphor, it's autobiography condensed to commandment. Television offers have surfaced periodically, streaming networks curious about nostalgic revival, but he meets them warily. I'd do it, he admits, if it helps people, not ratings. That stipulation tells the entire arc of his metamorphosis. The man once defined by spectacle now insists on substance. When he does appear on camera, it's within documentaries exploring criminal justice reform or faith journeys. He believes storytelling still saves, but only when stripped of vanity. If folks see I'm still flawed, he says, maybe they'll believe grace is possible for them too. Grace, after all, has become his favorite theme. For Chapman, it's not a theological abstraction, it's muscle memory. Each week he speaks at addiction recovery meetings across the state, pacing before audiences who know his record as well as his resume. He opens with humor: you already Googled me, so let's skip judgment, then transitions into honesty, regret for lost relationships, mistakes shouted too loudly, anger carried too long. The candor disarms. By acknowledging imperfection, he converts notoriety into mentorship. If I'm proof of anything, he tells them, it's that God can use duct tape and diesel fumes to build ministry. Away from microphones, he finds contentment in routine. Morning chores, coffee brewed black, prayer on the back porch facing the Rockies. Friends who visit describe an air of peace shadowed by nostalgia. Photographs of Beth still decorate mantels. Next to them, family pictures with Francie form a dialogue across time. He calls the arrangement my reminder that love is better multiplied than replaced. That ability to integrate the past without erasing it underpins his emotional survival. Even estranged children occasionally visit, drawn by curiosity as much as reconciliation. Chapman receives them without sermons, humility does most of the talking. If they see I've stopped fighting ghosts, he says, maybe they'll want to stop too. He remains outspoken, but the bravado is gentler. When reporters press him about earlier controversies, on-air conflicts, cancelled shows, public arguments, he answers with rueful insight: television magnifies truth until it looks like sin and magnifies sin until it looks like truth. I gave them both. That perspective, delivered without bitterness, marks the man's transformation. He no longer divides life into wins and losses, he measures it in growth rings of understanding. Fame expanded him outward, grief deepened him inward. Between those two directions he has finally found center. Later life faith has also restored his trust in service. Partnering with regional churches, he funds small scholarships for ex-offenders to learn trades. He calls them bounties of hope, a phrase that illustrates both nostalgia and reinvention. Watching others rebuild what he once nearly destroyed reinforces his belief that divine humor still traffics in irony. The former fugitive teaching rehabilitation, proof that no biography is too crooked for redemption. From a distance, his story carries unavoidable sadness, the erosion of celebrity gloss, the toll of illness, the constant effort to hold a scattered family together. Yet up close, the atmosphere feels less tragic than sacredly ordinary. Chapman has built peace not by pretending the world never changed, but by letting it shrink to human scale. He once hunted across islands, now he gardens small plots of land, counting seedlings like fugitives you mean to set free. Time renders even metaphors kinder. He remains fiercely connected to fans who grew up watching him. Letters arrive weekly, some from prisoners crediting the show with inspiring reform, others from relatives of addicts who found comfort in his stubborn optimism. He answers each note personally, scrawling mottos that double as prayers: stay free by staying accountable. His crude handwriting, equal parts tattoo and scripture, carries authenticity that slick speeches can't. In miniature, those correspondences are the new bounty. He sends empathy where once he sent cuffs. When he speaks about legacy, there's no grandeur, only continuity. Beth kept the fire burning, he says. Francie keeps the house warm. My kids will decide what to do with the ashes. The remark lands heavy and gentle at once. For a man long presented as indestructible, mortality has become vocation. He attends church not for spectacle but fellowship, sitting near the back, singing hymns off-key. Parishioners describe him wiping tears without embarrassment, a gesture unimaginable during his televised prime. The armor has come off, the faith beneath it gleams brighter for the wearer. As twilight chapters unfold, Chapman's paradox resolves: the hunter becomes the shepherd. His once thunderous motto, "Bring him in alive," has found new meaning and appeal to souls, not suspects. The life that viewers might label sad is, by his measure, finally honest. He's learned that peace doesn't roar, it whispers. Sometimes it wears a leather vest and carries a Bible line with margin notes. Sometimes it just breathes quietly on a mountain morning while dogs bark in the distance. He knows the world will remember him for the chase, not the aftermath, but acceptance has replaced ambition. If they only remember that I tried to do right after doing wrong, he told one reporter, that's enough. The simplicity of that aim feels like epilogue and sermon fused. Perhaps this is how redemption ages, softer, slower, still fierce in conviction, but wrapped in humility, the bounty hunter tracking grace through the narrowing corridors of time. And when the day finally comes that the radio stays silent and the sun climbs over Colorado ridges he no longer has strength to patrol, Duane "Dog" Chapman's story will read less like tragedy than transformation. A man once defined by pursuit found what he'd been chasing all along, not fugitives, but freedom.